Hello, and welcome to another episode of Into the Woods with Trapping Girl. I am your host, Linda White, and today I have Cristina Jones with me from the FTA. Hi, Christina. How are you?
I'm good, Linda. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for being on. I was super excited. Um, Not just because I've got to know who you are over the last year, but I think that you have a lot of great points of view that will help so many people out there that kind of struggle with organizations and what really goes on behind the scenes and all those things. So I think that this is going to be a super exciting podcast, at least for me anyways. So hopefully everybody else feels the same way. But so tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, how you got started in the outdoors, all that fun stuff.
Okay. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me today. I'm super excited. I have been listening into your podcast since you started it, obviously following you on Facebook and all those places. And so it's pretty cool to be here today. I'm a little fangirl. I grew up in New Jersey. I still live in New Jersey. And my parents are from Brooklyn. It's kind of always my joke. They are not um, outdoorsy people. But I did grow up fishing, and we had a summer house in the northwestern corner of New Jersey. And so I actually spent my summers outdoors, um, playing outside and all of that stuff. So I was not afraid of the woods or being outdoors or getting dirty or anything like that. Just never really had that kind of connection to hunting or trapping or anything like that. I went to college in Vermont, and I had a lot of friends who hunted, but I was never, presented with the opportunity. And when I was in my late 20s, I kind of said, I lived at the shore, and I said I either wanted to move into a house that was on the beach, but who could afford that in their late 20s, or I wanted to be somewhere in the mountains with water. And so I ended up moving to a 200-plus-year-old house on 8 acres, up in Warren County, New Jersey, which is kind of up across from the Poconos for anybody who knows. And there were deer and there were bear. And I was kind of like, I could do this. Like, I like venison. I could hunt. And I guess, ignorance is bliss, because I just ordered a compound bow off the internet, and I went into a local shop and they set it up, and I self-taught myself to shoot, and I took hunter ed, and I went out and I hunted, and it just kind of clicked, and it was this opportunity to spend all this time outside, and I'd pop up my little ground blind on my property, and I'd load my Kindle with books, and I would literally just go and sit all day.
Wow.
And so that sort of snowballed, and I was really into deer hunting, really into bear hunting, and we have a really strong group of local trappers, and a lot of them are hunters as well. And so they would always say, in order to really learn how to hunt and learn the outdoors, you need to take up trapping. You need to at least learn how to trap, so that you're learning how to read, the signs in the woods, not just like, oh, look, there's a deer trail, but oh, look, well, that's probably not a deer trail because of this, the way it's laying. It's probably a small fur bearing animal trail. So I actually ended up taking our 2-day trappers course here in New Jersey. It's required, back in 2015. And I was like gung ho, and I took the class and I really enjoyed it and I learned a lot. But it's a huge uphill climb to go from not having anybody that well enough to trap with, to just kind of like go out on your own. I'm sure people probably say the same about deer hunting, but for me, deer hunting was like riding a bike. But to learn to trap on my own was kind of like, ooh, I don't know about this, and I had just started dating my husband at the time, and he's a lifelong outdoorsman, but never trapped. And so for Christmas, he got me this giant box of trapping stuff. And I don't think he even really knew, like, was this what I needed? But I set up some DPs. We're not allowed to use footholds here in New Jersey. And I set up some DPs for raccoons because that's like the thing to do. It's an easy way to learn. And I got a raccoon on the first day and I was like, okay, so this isn't so bad. Um, we are allowed to use snares here in New Jersey. And I still, to this day, have not set a snare. And so in with all of that, I guess probably I got very involved in sharing my passion for the outdoors, primarily hunting, with women who didn't have a way to start outdoors. And so that kind of has snowballed. I'm very involved in mentored hunt activities with women here in New Jersey, and we do all sorts of crazy programs. We do a deer camp, we do a turkey camp to get women started. And so now that I'm in this position and kind of going along on my trapping journey that's really just beginning as far as I'm concerned, it's pretty exciting to me because I've always told women, you know, that come through our mentored hunting programs, like, you really need to take the trappers class. Like, even if you don't ever plan to trap in your life, take it so that you have that foundation and that understanding of what it is that trappers do, because that will definitely change your outlook in the outdoors. And so that's where I'm at. I'm married. My husband is still, he's taken his trapper's course, but he's a couple steps behind me. And I was laughing because I was listening to your first episode where you talk about being Michael's pack mule, and my husband's kind of my pack mule on the weekends when we're trapping, you know, if he's not working. And so it's interesting to see, you know, his thoughts and his feelings. And as I'm getting more into it, and on both ends, both, you know, for a pastime and for work purposes, to see how it's affecting his thoughts and his views. And I think if he didn't have a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, he'd probably be running a trap line too.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, I don't know if people actually know the position that you're in with the FTA. I mean, you've kind of said a couple my position, but I don't know if people actually know the position that you are in. So you may want to tell them a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it's funny. I am always like, oh yeah, I work for the FTA, but I don't think people really realize what that means. So in May of 2021, I accepted a position as the business executive for the Fur Takers of America, which essentially means it's sort of like an executive director, nonprofit kind of um, meld of like office work and membership work and outreach work and all that kind of stuff. You know, there's a job description, but on any given day, I probably do, you know, 5 other things that have nothing to do on the job description.
I
So,
was gonna say, do you
but
even
I'm,
know what that job description is? Because every time I hear anything about like what you're doing or what not, I mean, I'm always like, wow, that I don't know if that's really what she signed up for.
yep, no, and it's funny, you know, I think that was probably one of the things that drew me to the position was that there was so much room for growth and there's so much opportunity to do so many things, which is really kind of what I'm good at. I always say I'm like a master of nothing, but a doer of all things. I like to keep busy and I like to do a lot of different, you know, activities. It's kind of like my whole life has been like that. And so it's perfect because it keeps me occupied and it keeps me learning, which is what I think is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Now, so being brand new kind of to trapping, you know, self-taught with hunting, but and even self-taught with trapping, what drew you to being part of the FTA?
Prior to joining the FTA, I was the executive director of a pretty large local county bar organization here in New Jersey that I had been with for about 5 years. And prior to that, I was actually a paralegal for 16 years. And so to some people, it was a big switch. To most people who know me very well, they were not surprised in the least. I had started kind of casually looking for a change while COVID was going on and things were happening. And I just kind of figured, oh, I'm never going to find anything that really kind of suits my purpose. My husband is blessed to be in a position, a government position where he gets like 5 weeks of vacation. And, here I was with like 2 weeks. And I was like, well, this isn't fun because we can't, and I had asked if I could work remotely. And they said, well, to a certain extent. And so I was really trying to find a really good fit in the nonprofit world because I love service work and something to do with the outdoors because it's really where my passion lies. And also something that would allow me to kind of work from wherever I was. Um, and the FTA posting came up and I read through it and I was like, oh, nope. And then I read through it again a couple days later and I was like, actually, I could do this. And I'm very friendly with a lot of our trappers here in New Jersey, and they are the salt of the earth. I mean, you spend any amount of time with a group of trappers and they are, I always say they remind me of my dad, blue collar, hardworking, just great group of guys. And so to me, I was kind of like, well, I love my local trappers. So how different would that be? And truthfully, when you survive working with a board full of attorneys, you can pretty much do anything. And so I figured, why not? I'll apply. And I honestly did not think I would even be considered for the position because I just thought they'll probably think, here's a girl from New Jersey, what can she bring to our organization? And so going through the interview process and all of that, I kind of was like, oh, and I remember saying to my husband, we were getting ready to leave to go to Wyoming for spring turkey hunting. And I said, I wonder if I'm going to hear from them soon. And he said, oh, I don't know. I said, I'm trying not to get really excited about it, but I really, really think like this is the position for me. And, because I'm like one of those crazy people who sees signs and believes in like all the, the universe is working for you or against you kind of stuff. And there were just so many signs along the way. And I got the call like 3 days before we were leaving for Wyoming. And I was like, oh my gosh, and I remember talking to Dave Hastings, the president, and his enthusiasm for the organization was probably 50% of really what made me kind of dig into the FTA and say, this is an organization I would be proud to work for. And so, yeah, so I started in May of last year and coming up on my 1 year anniversary. And every day is a new day. Every day is something different, literally, which is amazing. And it has been a lot of fun. It's been a really great experience. I get to work with some of the best people in the world, and I am so fortunate. But it's been interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and so you get to see all sides, like, you get to see the side of the trapper who sits there and thinks, "Oh, yeah, there's all these organizations, but, they're not what are they doing for me and everything?" But then you get to see the inside of how hard these organizations are really working for our trapping rights and what is all entailed, like we sit back and it's easy, when you're not on the inside of something. And I volunteer my time for a lot of different organizations. So I get a minute little part of what you're getting. Like I get that small thing, but I'm still nowhere near what you are. Um, but I think it's like really easy for some people to sit back and say, you know what, I'm not gonna donate my money. I'm not gonna get a membership. What are they really doing? And then you're on the inside, you know, you just came into that and you're like probably sitting there going like, wow, I did not even realize like this much happened. So can you tell us a little bit about, why is it so important to join an organization, whether it's your county, your state, or even on such a huge scale as the FTA and the NTA, and what they're really doing? Because right now, trapping is just under fire and under fire and under fire. I mean, we're coming from every direction right now.
Yeah, literally. And some of those directions are throwing 4, 5, 6 darts. So I think, one of the things everybody needs to realize is they're all volunteers. Obviously, I'm a paid position, and the NTA has some amazing counterparts to me working in their office as well. But our board members and our trustees, and they're all volunteers. And the amount of time that they dedicate to preserving and protecting trapping and that outdoor kind of lifestyle that we are all accustomed to or really desire to live. And just as an example, so in my time since I've been with the FTA, and I'm no stranger to antis and attacking what we love to do in New Jersey. I've been a very outspoken advocate for our bear hunt, which unfortunately is currently shut down.
Oh, no.
And so I knew the political side going into it, but what you don't see on that national level is, I will sit some days and listen to committee hearings. We just had it happen in Colorado with, the lynx, the mountain lion, and the bobcat, the SB 031 bill, that thankfully did not make it out of committee, which I really think was because the outdoor community really rallied, which was, as cheesy as it sounds, it was very heartwarming to see. They testified in great numbers. They showed up to, kind of silently protest and support in great numbers. Lots of letters were written, emails, phone calls, that kind of thing. And so we've got, that fire was going on in Colorado, and in Oregon, we've got all sorts of crazy stuff going on. And I have stepped up on behalf of the FTA. Oregon just put together a really great coalition of, I don't even know, probably 20 or 30 outdoor kind of, I'm going to call them stakeholders. It's Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and the NWTF and Oregon hunters organizations and outfitters and ranchers and you name it. And so they've put together this coalition because we've got IP13, which they're trying to get on the agenda for this year. And aside from that, they have had the forethought to see that, this is going to only be the first of many. There's a beaver working group going on. There's a trap group, trap check work group that was going on. And so it's kind of a hotbed in Oregon, a lot of those Western states. And so we've got that coalition that's just getting started, and they're already doing amazing work. And, so we're dedicated to attending those meetings. Both, the FTA and the NTA is at those meetings. We were given a spot at the table. And, like I said to Dave Hastings, when the opportunity to sit on some of the subcommittees came up, I said, Dave, do you mind if I offer to do this? I said, it's not necessarily part of that job description we're, ever expanding. I said, but I think it's really important that we don't allow trapping to be forgotten about. And, as Dave is a volunteer and he's pulled in 100 different directions, at least I can represent the organization and the trappers in that regard. We've got this snafu going on in New Mexico that if you don't know about it by now, you must be living under a rock, and I'm jealous, but they have shut down all public lands, and that took effect, I think it took effect this month. And so we are joining in with the New Mexico trappers and the NTA to fight that. There's stuff going on in Idaho. There's stuff going on in Minnesota, Montana. I mean, you name it. The wolves just got relisted. So that's going to be a whole other ball game. And then, out here on the East Coast, we've got states where they're trying to Virginia, I think they were trying to ban the foothold. And they're going after hunting with the use of hounds, and they're going after, they just actually put a bill in committee here in New Jersey for contests that included small fur-bearing animals. And so it's kind of like, and it's in legislation season is right now. It's when all that new legislation is getting introduced. And we've got some great partners like Sportsmen's Alliance and the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation who kind of keep us abreast on things, because it could be a full-time plus overtime position for somebody to track all of the bills across every state in this country that would affect trapping on some level. And I mean, you have to remember that if there are certain bills that are introduced, like I think it was Colorado, that introduced that bill, and I forget what bill number it was, this is 2 years ago now, that would effectively shut down ranching,
Mhm.
and it's like, that would have affected trapping. And, people don't always see that. And, going back to why it's important to join your organization is, I think a lot of times we aren't, you know, trappers and hunters. And we see this. I'm a huge volunteer with the Turkey Federation. And I say this to our board all the time, is that, we are humble people. We are not here giving our time and doing all of these things for the accolades or the pat on the back, but we're also doing ourselves a disservice,
Mhm.
because by not letting people know the work that we're doing, they don't know that we're doing work. They don't know
Right.
that we're speaking up on their behalf. And so, it's a shame, because I think that sometimes that's where a lot of that gets lost in translation, is that, well, what are they really doing for me? And it's I kind of like laugh, and I feel sometimes like, they think it's a joke, and it's not. We're not just here to, get together once a year and have a convention and, talk trapping. It's amazing the amount of work that goes on behind the scenes, just in the FTA politics side, which is such a big, unfortunate, I'm sure if Dave Hastings didn't have to worry about any legislation, it would be a good day for him. And, but we are doing college scholarships, and we are doing scholarships for trapping education. We just donated last year to the Wisconsin Women's Trapping Camp. And we've got Trappers College, and there's so many things that are going on that it would be impossible to talk about every single one, and it would be impossible to tell everybody the status. But to say, get involved, even if you, like you said, even if you just join your local trappers, whatever it is, organization, chapter, affiliate, whatever they are, you know, uh, my organization, because of COVID, they just meet at, one of the guys' houses right now. And I'm sure, everybody just gets around and kind of talks about trapping, but there's important stuff going on, and so sometimes that's the only way you're going to learn about it. We just completed a huge bobcat study here in New Jersey, the Division of Fish and Wildlife. And if you don't go to those trappers meetings, you're not hearing about that bobcat study. So they're going to start a Fisher study soon too, supposedly. So it's really important to learn about that stuff. And I think you don't need to give 24 hours a day, 7 days a week as a volunteer, but can you really afford to not give $40 to your local organization or whatever, the membership is, and maybe show up to a couple meetings a year at the very least, because you need to be involved. And if you're not involved and you don't know what's going on, when you lose your trapping rights or your trapping privileges and you turn around and you say, well, how come nobody did anything? It's devastating to the folks who are out there working. A lot of our volunteers work full time, they trap full time, and then they're doing this full time. They're not getting any sleep fighting on behalf of these folks. And so I think if you just give some of your time and a little bit of your money, you would be amazed at what is really going on behind the scenes for all of these I mean, we're all knee deep in the trenches. I don't know of an organization that isn't right now. So, but I get it. I get, we just talked about this locally at an R3 thing, that younger generation, not that I'm old, but the younger generation below me, they're not joiners. They don't join
Mhm.
organizations. And so it's kind of an ever evolving topic among all of the conservation organizations. Like, how do we get these people involved? And there is no, if somebody knows the secret sauce to it, please call me. So we're just here and we're just doing what we're doing. And part of my job description is to kind of start to educate outside of the trapping community that is the dedicated members. I forget what the numbers are, but like it's something like only 10% of the trappers in the United States belong to any trapping organization. And that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy,
Yeah, it is. It
So
is. Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think like something that people need to realize is, you know, PETA is extremely loud. They are very loud. They are very in your face loud. And it doesn't matter if what they're spewing is the truth, if it's a fabrication, if it's something that they've even, paid to make look like the truth. Like they are super super loud, and because they're so loud, they have a lot of big businesses behind them that you know um big organizations that are just piling money in. It's a good cause. It's a good cause. It's a good cause. And I've talked to so many trappers and women over the last couple years, and I've kind of it's funny, like when I first got into trapping, like that wasn't my thing. Like hunting, I'm sure you've heard like the squirrel story of me and every like all those things were they were not my thing. And it's funny how like you don't realize you have a passion for something, and then all of a sudden it just kind of falls in your lap and you're like, "Oh my god, I love this and I'm just going to just do whatever I can to help this grow." And so when I first started really diving into the trapping thing, I couldn't believe how quiet we were, like, and it was so many, and I was just having a conversation about this, how like, people will say, "Oh, I'm a fisherman." Yeah, no big deal. And then they're like, "Yeah, I hunt." And then it's like, "Well, I kind of, do this thing on the side," and they don't really want to say that it's trapping. And I like I'm so taken back by that, like because I'm super proud to be a trapper. Like the fruits of my labors, and I'm sure you've even seen, is wonderful for the outdoors. Absolutely phenomenal what trappers bring to the table. But like you said, we're such a humble group. Like nobody wants to really kind of be out in the spotlight screaming like PETA does, like how amazing we are. And I think that's something, social media is great. There have been some downfalls, like you can take a picture and twist it or take words. I've had that happen myself, take words and they twist it and whatever. But I think that it's so important for us as trappers to rally at this point. Like you were saying, there's so many bills and things coming each direction. And I think that's the point for them, honestly. Like if they have so many different things going all over the place and they have all this money, like they have hundreds of people. I mean, like you said, other than youth through the FTA, no one else is paid. This is all volunteered. Where PETA has like a whole board and a whole committee and everything, and they're all like making, six figures, and they're up there and they're going, and it's not a volunteer kind of thing. Where these organizations are trapping organizations, you know, we don't have all of those resources. So it's so important for us to make sure that we're utilizing the resources that we do have, and just like you said, $40. What is $40? I mean, think of like all the money you blow on everything else, you know? Like I mean, honestly, think about all the money you spend. I mean, I joke anytime that we ever go to like a convention, and of course, being a vendor, we're at ton of them. You know, I spend money on stuff that I don't need. Like, how many? Everybody says, do you really need new traps? And of course, always the answer is yes, I do. Like absolutely. But think about, if if maybe instead of, buying like that Jake trap, you bought, a Duke trap that year and you gave the rest of that money to the NTA or the FTA or even your,
Yeah.
your state, like the difference that that makes, and I don't think there's a lot of people out there who realizes, when you file certain things, certain class actions and everything, that's money. That like it's not free to just say, "Hey, I have an opinion about this," or "I'm gonna fight it." Like those things cost money.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not making six figures. And I'm probably doing more boots on the ground work than any of the higher ups at PETA. Um, and what's interesting what you were saying, and just to go back to this because otherwise my brain will squirrel and I'll forget. But what they seem to do is they take the same bill. So like across the United States, I'm sure at least 5 listeners in 5 different states could say, oh yeah, they did that here, as they introduced this anti-hunting fishing contest bill, right? And
Mhm.
so they've tried in New Jersey, this is like the third or fourth version of it.
Mm.
And they tried it the first year with fishing included, but we've got all this big money deep sea fishing tournaments here. And you are not going to tell some of these fishing clubs that they can't do that. And you know what? They threw the money behind it and they rallied and they spoke to their legislators and they educated the legislators, and fishing got taken out of it. And then it was the second version of the bill or the third version of the bill didn't include deer hunting because it didn't include, we have what we call the deer classic here in New Jersey, where people can enter their mounts and, win for all different categories. And so that got taken out. And now we're down to small fur bearing animals. So, which is basically because there was somebody that had a squirrel contest a couple of years ago and it was a family run event. And, the sad part of that is that the anti showed up and they were screaming some really awful things at the kids and the parents. And, they show up. They show up at every bear check station we ever had here during a bear hunt. There were antis and they were willing to get arrested. They show up at all of these community day type of green market, farm market events. They're showing up. And like you said, they're loud and they're proud. And they have been able to hone their message so that it doesn't sound as awful as it really is. And, do you agree that bear hunting is bad? Well, when you phrase it a certain way, everybody's going to agree with you. But the reality is, not everybody really does agree with you. They're just agreeing with that one statement. And next thing you know, we don't have bear hunting here.
Right.
We lost the use of footholds here in 1982 or 83. And so, you know, it is really important to speak up. And unfortunately, and I'm sure, you um, can probably attest to this, is that sometimes when you do speak up, you're not exactly accepted. And, I still speak up a lot about our bear hunt and supporting our bear hunt and the purpose behind our bear hunt. And I'm one of the few women. And, so they try to attack the emotional side of it. You're a woman, first of all, I think it's hilarious that any anti-woman is going to be yelling at me that I should be in the kitchen cooking rather than out hunting or trapping or fishing, when women were the original hunters and men were the gatherers, is
Right.
just absurd. They they put up billboards here like, real women don't let their men bear hunt, and so we would take them and we would Photoshop them and we would put up memes on Facebook that would say, you're right, we don't, we hunt them ourselves. um and it's, there's that they always try and go after that emotional thing with women, and it's kind of like, oh, whatever, it's not, I think women are more emotionally invested in our outdoor journeys, but for a totally different reason than what, they're calling cruel. We're actually looking at it as, we're managing wildlife. We
Right.
are um, aiding conservation. We are helping habitat. We are helping other species. And I spend a lot of time helping women on their outdoor journeys, and I don't know a single woman that isn't fully understanding of what they're doing,
Oh, yeah.
who isn't fully invested and knowing, it's incredibly important to me too that we kind of explain to them and help them understand their role as a hunter and a trapper and a fisher, fisherman. Um, and that it is conservation based and it is wildlife management based. And without it, you know, as we're seeing across the country, because unfortunately low fur prices mean, low numbers of trappers, is that issues arise. Like in our town, in our county area, in our 3 or 4 town area, I saw our animal control officer posted the other day, we've had like 40 raccoons with distemper in the last
Mm,
3 months. And like that is not good. And most normal neighborhood people are not going to understand that. I hear that and I'm like, holy crap, like what is going on? And it's probably a direct result, because the trapping populations are, the trappers are not trapping like they would because of
right.
fur markets. And so, um, but I think to come full circle back to why it's important to join, you know, look, I spend a lot of money on a lot of stupid things, but
Uh-huh.
I will always, yeah, like, I mean, what, $40 is like 2 trips to Starbucks. So, and with gas prices, like I get it, but ask for it as a gift.
Yeah.
Ask, it's kind of like my husband and I, what do you get for somebody who has everything? So like a lot of times we'll do like lotteries for tags, like like for Christmas I got you your Wyoming elk preference point, or for your birthday I'm going to get you your membership to the New Jersey Federation of Sportsmen. And so it's kind of like a really good thing that we do with each other, and I would encourage everybody to do it. It's a gift. Give
Yeah.
the like You're going to get a kid a $40 toy. Give them a gift to a conservation organization. Most of them are going to include like the NTA, the FTA. You're going to get magazines. You're going to get, something for your money. And
Right.
I don't know of an organization out there that doesn't give you some sort of, incentive at some point. And so start gifting memberships to people
That's a
instead of
great
getting them
idea.
another toy. Yeah. And, they may not appreciate it when they open up the envelope. we we started doing it, because my husband and I don't have kids, and we were buying, gifts for all these kids, which I absolutely love, but I'm like, they don't need any of this junk, like, and they don't even care. Like, they're not going to be a year from now like, oh, Aunt Christina got me, this Tonka toy. So what we started doing was making a donation on behalf of each kid every year to, like, our organization or an organization in their behalf, or we would buy toys to donate or something like that. And it's just kind of snowballed. And I mean, I can't think of a better thing that you could give a fellow trapper or a new trapper. I mean, you think about where you would go for that knowledge. And I'm always surprised. I'm always so amazed when I open up that magazine, whether it be, the Trappers Post or Fur Taker magazine, or, the NTA magazine. And I'm like, gosh, this is full of good information, like
Mhm.
chock full of good information. And so, I would definitely encourage people to think about, give that gift of membership and encourage them to, maybe not necessarily give their entire life, but find the time, go to your your local chapter convention or something like that. We were very fortunate. We actually happened to be in upstate New York last year when the New York Trappers Convention was going on, and we had a couple hours. We grabbed a friend of ours that was up there with us, and we walked through, and he actually lives up in that area part-time, and he was like, wow, I'm not a trapper, I hunt, but this is like really cool. And he ended up like going back the next day on his own
Oh,
and
wow.
like really just kind of, yeah. And so you never know, what you're going to kind of find at those kinds of events. But like there's demos and there's the vendors, and just what is it, usually like $10 a person to just go walk through for a couple hours, catch a couple demos, support a lot of the vendors if you can, and to just get out there,
Right.
that could be the way you get involved. And if that's the way you get involved, then that's the way you get involved. Everybody is going to find involvement in a different place. But I literally cannot say enough of how important it is to support the organizations, because even if, you're not going to support the FTA on a national level, support your local chapter, because those local chapters are supporting the national organizations. And we're here, we're not going to turn around and say, well, somebody from this area didn't support us, and we don't have enough support in that area or enough membership in that area, so we're not going to fight for that. We don't have that luxury. If something comes up and we as an organization need to take a stand, we're going to take a stand, whether there's a membership base there or not. But our stand is only built stronger if there's already a foundation in that area. And so, it's definitely important. If you want to continue trapping and you want to continue, doing what you're doing and enjoy it and introduce other people to it, you've got to join an organization,
Right.
because they are literally chipping away at us.
Yeah, and I think it's
And they're
important.
going to win.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to realize, like you said, about how, if we don't have the strong support here, we're still helping out, but you need that support. So I think people need to understand, you hear the bill in Colorado or what's going on in Oregon and all these other things. Like, just because you don't live in that state doesn't mean you can't get to be part of it. Like whenever that call in New Mexico went on, and it was last year this time, I remember because we were actually traveling to Arkansas to go trapping, and I was sitting on the phone listening to this call, and it's important, like you said, numbers count. And it doesn't matter what state you're in and what state has something going on. Being involved in their bills is important because, you know, what happens there is going to affect your state somehow in some way because
Yeah.
what they can say. So when they introduce that very same bill in your state, they can say, well, it passed in New Mexico and this is why. So it should pass here. And I don't think people make that connection. I'm like part of, I think, of like 7 or 8 different state organizations. I can't even tell you because every time we go to a convention, we join that organization, like because we look at it as is like they're supporting us by having us here. We need to support them, and I think it's important for people to realize just because you're in part of your state organization or, maybe your county, join those neighboring states too. Join those other ones that are having some issues, like Colorado or New Mexico. Join those state organizations. They need your help right now. And maybe you can't get on a call with them, but the $40 that you could send them might help pay for the lawyer. You know what I mean? Like only 20 minutes of the lawyer, but still that's 20 minutes, you know?
Well, I mean, and to put it into perspective, Linda, New Mexico, one vote.
Right.
One vote.
Yeah,
And
that's
and
crazy.
like I get chills when I say it, because it literally came down to one vote.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
how how did we let this happen? And people rallied, but these organizations that are working against us are literally working off a playbook. And like you mentioned, they're going to try it in one state. And the minute it gets any kind of traction in that state, or it goes and it passes, they now have that tool in their toolbox to now go to the other states and figure out how they can make it happen in that state, because it happened in that state, so it could happen here. And that's what they're going to do. It's just going to be like, it's like a domino effect. You see it get filed in like all these different states, and it's like, whew, if this passes in just one state,
Yeah.
we're in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
And New Mexico, one vote, one vote. Like, it is almost incomprehensible to me how that could happen. And we work so hard to kind of educate, on a national level, and do what we can do to help our legislators. And I'm here to tell you, like, they're open to conversation. I think too, a lot of times people don't think that they're being heard, or that they will be heard, or whatever. But I never miss an opportunity to send a quick email to my local political officials if there's a bill going on here in New Jersey that I don't agree with, or if there's a national situation going on, because you would be surprised. It does have an impact. Is it always going to have an impact, or are they always going to vote one way? Not necessarily, but you never know, and you won't know until you try. And we have proven, like we proved in Colorado, that if enough people stand up and make educated, knowledgeable, presentations in support or not in support of something, we can get the win on it. We can get these things defeated. And so, not to spend 9 hours talking about politics, but that's what's going on right now, unfortunately. And I would definitely encourage people, like you said, it's never a bad thing to join these organizations. And sometimes your membership is tax deductible, and it's in the grand scheme of things, it's like pennies on the dollar. And if you think the organization is not doing anything, if you're a member, ask them. I, you
Right.
know, I always say, we're an open book. Nothing we're doing is like shrouded. So if anybody had any kind of question of like, our meeting minutes get published, or, if they want to know what our stance on something is, ask. We're not gonna be like, oh, that's private. It's not private. We're a national membership organization. Like, we're working for you. And so go to the organization and ask. And, you know, you'll probably end up having a 3-hour political conversation, but you have to, it's a hard, it's a really, and I don't really know how to explain it, but it's a really important thing to do. And I can understand and I can sympathize with people who have the hesitation and they don't want to get involved, and for the reasons that they don't want to get involved. But at the same time, we're not going to have a choice,
Yeah.
because we are going to lose everything that we love, that we're passionate about. And we're going to be sitting here like, whoa, how did that happen? And there are people fighting for it. So why wouldn't you support the folks who are fighting for it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, and it's easier to stop something than try to get it back later on. So, if they take these things away,
Oh,
to try to fight to get it back, like, that's really gonna be an uphill battle, so it's super important to get involved now while we still have them than it is to try to take them, to fight to whenever they're taken away. Now, if people wanted to find out, like, what kind of bills are going on in their state, or does the FTA supply something that would show them that, or is there a way that they can maybe monitor some of their own state? um is there something that place they can look? Is what would you say is the best way to really see what's going on where you're at?
um, so trying to think. I don't know that we have, like, so the Sportsmen's Alliance, is definitely a great organization you can go to. And they kind of monitor nationwide what's going on with regard to trapping and hunting and fishing and outdoor kind of stuff. Um, what I actually tend to do myself, and I'm pretty plugged in with a lot of our organizations here in New Jersey, but every once in a while, I will go to, all of these bills are published online. And so like I'll go to our state legislator page and I'll just type in like, search trap, trapping, hunt, hunting, that kind of thing. And it'll pull up everything that's currently on the docket. And so there's probably not any one clearinghouse that I would say anybody could go to. Certainly they could reach out to us, to me, to
Mhm.
Dave Hastings, and I'm sure John Daniels, the NTA, and we can let you know what we're aware of. Um, I mean, we have a board meeting tonight, and there's probably 10 or 15 states on the list that have something going on, and it's everything from, New Mexico and the lawsuit to, I think it was Ann Arbor, Michigan. The town wants to create an ordinance that bans the sale of fur.
Oh, yeah,
And,
I
so
saw
we
that.
are literally, we're literally tracking like all of the, like everything from like big, big issues to, smaller town and city issues. Um, but I'm sure that we won't have a complete list because it's almost impossible. But I would say if you're really invested in it, either go to your state organization. I know my state organization here in New Jersey, they're pretty up on anything that has to do with the trapping bills and that kind of thing. Or just, self-educate. I'm a big fan of, if I can't figure it out or I can't find somebody who knows, I just go to Google. um, and Google your state legislator website and it'll all come up. I know, I get pretty familiar with like Colorado and Oregon and New Mexico, and they all kind of work the same, they just look a little different, but you can search all the bills, and you'll be amazed at what you see and what gets buried in the bottom of a description of a bill that has, you know, seemingly on the surface, nothing to do with the outdoors. And then there it is in the bottom, something
Mm.
that would strip a right away from us. So
Yeah, New York is very good. We have a woman who she loves to attach little outdoor bills to something else. So we can kinda put it in. Luckily, most of them never, ever, ever, ever pass because she's, like, so left wing, and even though that New York is, like, left wing, where I mean, she's, like, way out there, so luckily they don't ever pass, but, she's really good at doing that, so that you're right, that is something definitely to look at and to kinda pay attention and educate yourself, and, it's great to have these organizations who are fighting for our rights, but it's our responsibility of outdoors men and women to educate ourselves and like you said, go in and look at this stuff. Make sure you're paying attention because we can't just say, "Oh, well the NTA or the FTA, they've got it taken care of." We need to be a part of that. They have it taken care of because they have the support and the rally of the trappers behind them. So yeah, I mean that's absolutely um very important for people to realize. So we kinda got off on a tangent on that because I kinda like
yeah.
sorry. I think it's so important and, like, I try to, like, make little posts and stuff like that, on Facebook about, like, join your organizations and, like, what the effects of trapping does for other people, and sometimes I think that, like, people get sick of me posting the same kind of thing, just worded differently, so I think it's great for somebody to hear other than me, but I also wanted to talk about the FTA and the college that the FTA has because, quite honestly, until about 2 years ago, I didn't realize, like, what a phenomenal resource this is, not just for new trappers, but for old trappers as well. Like, and I've talked to Beth a couple times and Robert and even Dave Eccles about it and everything. And like This is just a phenomenal resource for trappers. Like, absolutely blown away by education and what is out there. So, do you wanna just touch a little bit about that? I mean, this isn't, like, supposed to be like a sales pitch or anything, but I just think it's so great for people to know what the FTA has and this resource. All right, so we're going to leave you on a little cliffhanger there. That was part 1 of my interview with Christina. Part 2 will be next week. I hope you really got an insight a little bit more on who Christina is, the FTA, their positions that they hold on our trapping rights, how they're out there fighting daily to make sure that you get to have those privileges, that you get to continue trapping the way you know it and the way you love it. Next week, we will talk a little bit about some of the fun things that the FTA does. And I really hope that the biggest takeaway from this was become a member, become involved, become a volunteer. There's so many amazing volunteers that the FTA has and any of the other organizations that are out there. This was just a blimp into a national organization. But I mean, like you have the NTA, which is another great, phenomenal national organization. You have your state organizations, your local organizations. Become members, become involved, give your time. It is so, so important. I'd like to thank you all for listening. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Trapping Girl Inc., Sawmill Creek Baits and Lures, Trevor Barnes from Barnes Hide and Fur, Adrian Romero from Romero Fine Arts. And again, I hope you listen next week to part 2 and hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.